and welcome to the new episode of Innovation from the Global South, the Future Frame TV series on Traces.Dreams. This is your host, Dr. Almas, and my today's guest is Dr. Sudesh Sivarasu. Dr. Sudesh is an associate professor of biomedical engineering and head of the medical devices research at University of Cape Town, South Africa. I call him a serial innovator. And why I say so? Let's discover it in our today's episode. Hi, Dr. Sudesh Sivarasu. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Dr. Almas. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
So, is that right that you are the author of more than 40 patents and, couple of, dozens of inventions? May I call you a serial innovator?
I will hold that title of serial inventor until I have made a significant impact on the society. But just to get the numbers right, a little over 50 and a couple of dozens of inventions.
That's great. You have academic background. Mostly I interview people who are entrepreneurs and taking, their startups to next levels of commercialization. And today I'm very excited to talk to you because I can see that in our audience, there are so many academics, and definitely they're going to have lots of inspiration from your work. Can you highlight your 3 to 5 most important inventions that you yourself are really proud of?
Thank you, Almas. It's a very difficult question to answer because every invention or every innovation is a child of yours, and you can't differentiate which one is most important, which one is least important. But maybe as a screening factor, we could look into inventions that have actually reached people, inventions that have actually looked on creating jobs, creating companies, etc. So probably I could start by saying with something that has led to a company and then go on to something that has impacted people on COVID times. So the first innovation that I would like to highlight here is a device called ZibiPen. ZibiPen is a reloadable adrenaline auto-injector where it is used for patients suffering from anaphylaxis. And this is a intramuscular injection that needs to be administered to patients suffering with anaphylaxis. And the current solutions that are out there in the market are quite expensive and inaccessible to people who need them the most. So we came out with this simple but a very effective solution called ZibiPen, which basically uses a reloadable principle. So if the medicine epinephrine expires in 18 months, you don't need to discard the whole device. Rather, you just change the medicines as such. And we have multiple patents on this particular invention. And this solution went out to become one of our successful startup companies from my laboratory called Impulse Biomedical, led by 2 of my postgraduate students, graduates from my lab. And this is a very successful company which has attracted multi-millions of dollars worth of investment and also created quite a lot of employment. About 10 to 12 graduates from my own lab are working in this company. So that's one of the technologies or innovations that I would like to highlight. The next solution is an open source solution, which I'm really proud of. While we are talking about many inventions that are patented, it's also critical to understand that to make technology accessible, we need to keep certain technologies in the open source. So the solution is called ptosis crutches. Ptosis crutches are crutches that are used for ptosis, ptosis is nothing but drooping of eyelids. And this is caused by a neurological condition called myasthenia gravis. And this is very specific to people with African ancestry. And in some cases, people even have a bilateral ptosis, so both the eyelids droop. And this is a procedure that cannot be surgically corrected. So it will have to be physically and mechanically elevated. So the eyelids droop below the visual axis, and that causes the patients with a lot of discomfort. So the patient will have to either see like upwards or drop their eyelids like this to see what's ahead of them. So we created this very simple 3D printable solution inspired from Google Glasses, something that can be mounted on a normal frame of glasses. So this ptosis crutches are a clip-on that can be 3D printed and put onto to your regular spectacles. And it uses a structure that actually sits on your eyelid crease, and that elevates your eyelids, right? So we made this open source. So after getting proper approvals from the government. And currently, this solution is used by members across 13 different countries. So interestingly, you can see that the impact, I assess this impact to be higher because we have reached Afghanistan, we have reached Nepal, we have reached France, Germany, South Africa, India.
How much time you took from the point where this invention was made till it reached 13 different countries that you're saying?
That's a brilliant question. So 13 different countries did not happen overnight. So initially we took it in a process where we did a thorough clinical evaluation, clinical trials of this solution, and then we found the solution to be effective. Once we found the solution to be effective, what we did was we reached out to the community that is affected by the myasthenia gravis and specifically mitosis, and we saw that there was a need or adoption from these communities on this technology. So once we did that, what we did was we sought permissions from the government because it's a technology crossing the border is a problem. So you need to have proper approvals on that. So we put it on the public domain. We didn't put the whole design in the public domain because of the potential indemnity that it may cause. So anybody who needs these devices can reach to us and we will ship them. And we've got queries from different parts of the world and we go through a proper agreement process. And then the 13 different countries that I'm saying are the countries that have actually made the contracts and they received the devices. And for example, we found it extremely difficult to ship item from South Africa to Afghanistan. But this device actually went to Afghanistan and is being used by somebody in Afghanistan. So 13 different countries is just to give you a geographical spread of the solution, but it actually has multiple number of users who have been benefited from this. And what is so nice to see about this is how the people respond to when they receive this solution and say how this simple solution has actually changed their lives. So I would want to highlight that as my second thing because of its vast and the impact that it has created. And I want to showcase another technology called FlexiGen, which is my upcoming technology. So one that is successful, one that is open source, that is quite spread across the world. The third one is something that is upcoming. FlexiGen is a flexible mobile hysteroscopic device. And hysteroscopy is a complex ICU-based procedure where you enter into a female uterine cavity to diagnose and to take biopsies if there is any abnormalities. And these are done under very strict ICU conditions. But we wanted to change that procedure because maternal screening, or even for that case cervical screening, cervical cancer is going to be quite a common thing according to WHO in Africa. So we want to make these cervical screening systems more accessible. One way of making it more accessible is by reducing the pain that these devices actually introduce. So what we did was we reduced the size of the device to less than 4.5 millimeters, so it can enter into complex cervix anatomies. But at the same time, we also introduced or invented a smart bending mechanism which can actually align itself and enter into the orifices without actually causing much of a trouble. So if you use a traditional hysteroscope, it is you use a very rigid scope to enter into the cervix, the retrospected angle of the cervix, and then see what's to inspect the anatomy. The smart bending mechanism, it is actually quite easier to navigate these complex anatomies. So you don't need to go into a central anesthesia. You can just do the localized anesthesia and that would do the purpose. And more importantly, the whole evaluation can be done on a smartphone. So you don't need a complex visualization system. And more importantly, this whole procedure can be done using a nursing assistant, and images and information can be transmitted to a specialist in a tertiary hospital and evaluated. So this kind of cuts the long story into something that is into a office procedure. So even a GP can do it, or a nursing assistant can do this, and we can just send the information back to specialist doctors and get the information diagnosis right. So we are now setting up a company called VAS MedTech based on this technology, and we are hoping that this would actually make a huge impact in the lives of women, especially in Africa, where there is expected cervical cancer numbers are going to be higher. So we are trying to see how we can make this technology more accessible through the startup company. So that's the three of my solutions. But I want to focus on something that we did for COVID. probably let's start with something simple and let's start with something complex and go with something complex. Design something called Visor, VIZAR, UCD Visor. And this is a solution when the whole world was looking into a sophisticated 3D printed. We took a step back and we just thought maybe COVID is going to stay with us for a little longer. So we don't 3D printing is great, but it may not be sustainable. We can't expect somebody in rural Africa to actually pick up a 3D printer and do these solutions. So we wanted to come out with a solution of simple face shields, which can be made using household items. So here comes UCT Visors. UCT Visors are simple but effective face shields that can be used in clinical and non-clinical setups. And it uses strap of foam, elastic band, and a transparent sheet. That is all it has. And it is extremely cost effective, and it can be made like one in every 3 to 4 minutes if you can put that together. And you can make hundreds, if not thousands, of these in a single day, in a single batch of manufacturing. And by doing this, the cost of the device goes extremely low, but also we made it a disposable device so that the need for repurposing or recycling is reduced. So by doing this, what we have done is currently we are looking at we are getting closer to. We have gotten over 44,000 of these visors being distributed across South Africa. But more importantly, what was interesting is that we were able to give these devices. We got this after registration for these devices, SAPRA as the South African Health Product Registration Authority certification for this device. But we were able to get it extremely low cost, like about less than about one-fourth of the what market price is currently going for the device of the similar kind. But more importantly, what we also found is that we were able to give employment to about 10 different people who were able to work on this solution. And because of its nature, that it has caused positive impact on the society, we got tremendous amount of generous donations from our donors, which helped us to feed into the system so that we were able to give these solutions free of cost to the to the users who were needing it. So one of the things that we always emphasize in our grouping is that frugal innovation or a cheaper solution doesn't necessarily have to look cheap. So you've got to make it look sophisticated as well. So in one way of doing that is making sure that it is packaged well, making sure that it is labeled properly, making sure that if irrespective of where it comes from, it needs to have a certain standard without compromising on the cost factor, which needs to be cost effective. But we also emphasize the fact that it needs to be standardized. It needs to look sophisticated. People should not feel shy to wear these visors. Those are the things which again counts into in favor of using a device or not using a device. So these were that's UCT visors. Would like to briefly touch on the last innovation. So the need of the hour when COVID pandemic struck, it was for ventilators. So we have been working with ventilators for a very long time, like almost a decade. And there was a call in South Africa for national ventilator projects. So we partnered with South Africa's CSIR, and CSIR came out with this brilliant, very effective solution called CSIR Life, which is a CPAP ventilator system. So we were the clinical partners to CSIR, and we did the clinical usability testing for these ventilators. So let me explain what a usability testing is. As an engineer, I have a certain way of doing things. I have a certain way. I understand certain numbers. I understand how things work, how devices work. But as clinicians, the clinicians may not understand the same language as I do. But if you look at the reality of the world, most of the medical devices are designed by engineers, but used by clinicians. This translation of engineering language into something that is clinically understood or understandable needs to happen in a very clear manner. Otherwise, whatever I intend to put as a designer may fail as when a clinician tries to use it. So this became a very critical issue while designing the ventilators. So we came out with a unique system called formative usability testing. So basically, the usability testing is how, as an end user, you perceive that this device to be, whether it is usable, not usable, or extremely good or extremely bad. So we kind of put out a systems engineering based approach for creating this usability protocol so that ventilators, which is going to be used across the world, across the country, by different people of different profiles, from nurses to ICU assistants to surgeons to whatnot, even ambulance drivers. There's going to be quite a wide variety of users. So we kept all of this in mind and designed a usability protocol, which helped the CSAR Life CPAP device to be certified by SAPRA. And eventually, this also became like unofficial standard of testing ventilators in South Africa. And currently, we have tested 5 different ventilators or 5 different ventilation solutions using this format of usability testing protocol that we came up during the pandemic. The beauty of this is the solution that we were part of has ended up being adopted nationally, and we have about 18,000 ventilators being made in South Africa, for which we are part of, and that is something that definitely my team and I are quite. I wouldn't say proud, but we are so excited that we could contribute to something like for the COVID pandemic.
That's great, Sudesh. I mean, I just let you speak your heart, about whatever you have done. And I mean, the most important inventions that you are proud of. And in fact, I am so much, proud of you, of your work. And I was just wondering, how many team members do you have, who are behind all this work?
It's quite a limited team. So, for example, the COVID task team was only about 6 members strong. Including me, it was 7 members strong. So all the impact that you're seeing was made by this 6 to 7 members team. But my team, my medical devices team, is about 10 members strong. I have another wing called Orthopaedic Biomechanics, which is about 6 members strong. So it's less than about 20 members strong altogether. So it is, and most of them are students. Most of them are postgraduate researchers, students, either masters, PhD, or postdocs. They are within that student profiles. So the interesting thing is, you kind of empower them with these innovations, and you kind of give them this opportunity to innovate and actually create an impact that actually changes their lives and also creates a career pathway for them as well. Because many of the engineers who were inventors or innovators, co-inventors, ended up being starting up a company which they are now currently part of, or ended up working for a startup company which was created by some of the other inventors, or using this experience to gain a job in the industry, because we only see this distinct gap between what academia offers and what industry needs. And this kind of translatory science is what is needed to bridge this gap. And I feel that by making the students more exposed or the researchers more exposed to what the industry needs, it makes them more employable. So it kind of creates that cycle of employment creation and employment acquisition. So it kind of goes quite well within that realm. So it's a relatively smaller team by global standards.
I was listening very carefully about your description about your inventions, and I was wondering. You mentioned about the language. It's very difficult, sometimes for the academics to understand the language of the clinicians, and clinicians to understand the language of the academics. So, how do you deal with that? And it is a problem that I see. It's worldwide.
We need to understand whether we are the drivers or we are the service providers. And I feel as engineers, you've got to be service providers. So in order for you to be a service provider, you need to understand your client's needs more importantly, right? And this is applicable across the domains. So if you're a service provider, you need to take into account how you're going to be delivering the service. So for which the most important thing is to ensure that you understand their language. So that is by understanding anatomical terms, so that you don't ask them what that means. You basically know what that is. So read your anatomy before getting to the clinician, anatomy and physiology before getting to the clinician. And more importantly, also making sure that you communicate to them in a very respectful manner that we are in two different worlds. So it is going to take some time, but when it comes, it will work properly. Just make sure that that kind of communication is very clearly laid out. And if you look at the industry operates in a completely different manner. So, moving from like an academic to a clinician, engineer to a clinician, to academic to industry. Industry works in something that is in a totally different tangent to that of academia, because in academia there is no time pressure, and there is accountability, but at a very long time cycle. Whereas in industry, the accountability time cycle is very, very short. So it is almost on a weekly basis, sometimes if not a daily basis. And the time crunch that they have is quite different to what we have in academia. So again, as a service provider from academia into industry, if you're going to be supplying student graduates to be employed at the industry, you are the service provider. So you need to be understanding their language. So which means that you need to train your graduates to understand the language that the industry speaks, which is about the time cycle of response. You can't wait for 72 hours to respond to an email, because on a Slack, if it is not responded within 2 hours, then there is something wrong as per industry standard. So you need to educate simple things like that to the students or graduates to ensure that they speak the language that the industry speaks. Right. So
Yeah.
this is about understanding the context of whom we are communicating with, and also understanding your own role, whether you're a service provider or a service requester. And I feel that academia as a service provider, I may be wrong, but that's how I see we fit very well into multiple domains.
One other thing that I was wondering, you have been working with inventions, for solving problems for people coming from Africa, people from, different low income countries. What was the thought process that brought you in this field, for not just, restricted towards publishing articles? You went for something more practical, to have a product in your hand and taking that to the market, to the users. What was the thought process or that journey that you had?
It's a very interesting question and a very difficult question to answer as an academic, because I don't see myself as a regular academic. Because academia, at least in the world that we are in, is pretty much governed by publish or perish kind of as mechanism. And To bring out innovations in a way that is understood by academics is quite difficult, because unfortunately we do not have metric systems to measure innovations other than numbers of innovations. So, for example, the H indices of the academic world may not be applicable for innovators and inventors, because
Not at all.
it's a different world altogether. So I think the onus lies on us as people who choose to do or choose to take a slightly different path to establish how and to communicate how the work that you do is actually also contributing to people's lives, and how it's the kind of impact that it is creating. So I want to go back to referring one of the president of IFMBE's quote. IFMBE is the International Federation for Medical and Biological Engineers. He once mentioned, whether you want to be a doctor or a biomedical engineer. So I'm a biomedical engineer, and the audience majority, school learners, were saying, "I want to be a doctor, and I want to be somebody who can treat people and create impact in the lives of people." And that's obvious, right? And also coming from an Indian family, being a doctor is considered to be first, engineer is second, something that they have their own order. So we were asked this question, and obviously, I wanted to be a business person to begin with, but then my aptitude to change towards becoming an orthopedic surgeon, which actually ended up being a biomedical engineer. That's my transition. But then I also thought, okay, maybe a doctor or a surgeon would have been a cool profession. But then he said, he asked, okay, if you were a surgeon or a doctor, and if you were treating, say, 10 to 20 patients a day, how many patients would you treat in your lifetime? And then we did a quick math. So 20 patients a day, probably about 250 working days. That's about 500 patients a year. Probably, if I work for, say, 30, 35 years, so, we're looking at about 15 to 20,000 people altogether, right? Max to max, even if I make a mass impact by doing that. And he said, okay, so if you were a good doctor who can work for 20 to 30 years, you can make impact on about 15 to 20,000 people, Right. That's great. But if you are a good biomedical engineer, and if you can come out with one solution, and that one solution can solve some people's life, it can impact millions of people on a single day. So now you tell me whether you want to be a doctor or a biomedical engineer. That actually changed my perspective on how I look at things, because now a simple thing like the ventilators I mentioned, 18,000 ventilators, has actually impacted hundreds of thousands of lives of people. I wouldn't have done this
Absolutely.
if I were a doctor. Not that I'm saying that's anything different, but for the profession that I am doing, the impact can be exponentially higher. Right. So it's all about how you see it. Not that I landed in here. I'm talking about the positive side of things. It's also a way of looking at things.
What is impact for you?
Impact is changing lives in a positive manner, changing the quality of life. And if you want to be very specific, changing quality of life. If you want to be even more specific, changing the quality of life with least expenses. And if you want to be even more specific, changing quality of life with reduced cost, but in an equitable manner across the domain.
Do you have any mentors in your life?
Yes, I do. I still do. So this was my postgraduate supervisor. So I had a very, I must say, a rough postgraduate life because I always had this contrasting belief. Either I excel in something or I fail in the other things. So I had this contrasting things. And this supervisor, Professor Laza Matthew, who's still my mentor, he was the one who identified me, who was the last bencher in the class. He he put special interest on me because when he taught a subject on rehabilitation engineering, that is about rehabilitating lives of people, something struck me, and I was like so curious about the subject, and I really scored very well in the subject because I loved the subject. Whereas the other subjects I didn't like much, so I didn't care too much about learning those subjects. And I was a average to above average kind of student in my college life. So he actually gave me an opportunity to work on something that is more practical, and that kind of sparked my interest in the field of biomedical engineering. That eventually led me to upgrade to a PhD and then continue that as my profession. And that is Professor Lasamati, with whom I'm still in contact. We speak almost on a by fortnightly basis, and I get advice on very critical matters. And it is also the student teacher relationship that I have with him that has got me so long. I must say, the Professor Laza Matthew is still my mentor.
So having a good mentor is important. Any
Most
role model, or he is your own model as well?
So he's a great guy. He's a great person. I really respect him. The role model, I wouldn't call it to a specific person as such, but I would say, somebody. I don't want to be a flashy inventor. I want to be somebody who has made impacts on people's lives, and who can be remembered for the impact that they have made even after their times. So somebody like a Tesla, for instance, right? He's not a flashy inventor, but he actually has made significant inventions that is something that we are still using today, right? Not that I have anything against Edison, but Edison was the flashy inventor. But I want to be like the Teslas of the world, where we can change the world, to change the thought process of the world, and change how things are done. There is traditionally how it is done. Can we change it? Can we bring in a different mindset to servicing, and can we impact people's life? That's my whole motive.
You are originally from India. You're working in South Africa. Anywhere in your career did you feel that if you would be in a country where resources would be really, in much better in terms of money,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
things they would be a bit more faster, or you think that it depends a lot on from person to person? You still could do it, and there was no problem, by your side. You didn't face anything in this regard.
That's a fantastic question, Almas. So, I would want to say the path that had taken has led my thought process. And if it was any different, if I had unlimited supply of money and unlimited supply of uh, essentials, I don't think I would have actually used the cost effective or affordability quotient, which is actually playing a huge role across all my innovations. So let me give you an example. In my class, I have something called a 200 Rand challenge or a $10 challenge. So I give $10 to the students and I ask them to solve a problem that they identify. They need to come out with a proof of principle on how they have solved. And all that they have is only $10 to spend or 200 South African rands to spend. You will be surprised by restricting the budget, how creative one gets, but how innovative they think about using household things. They think about coming out with something that is completely out of the board. So it's things like that that actually forces you to become a better innovator or better engineer for that case. So I in early stages of my career I have actually thought maybe if I have had a better 3D printing facility, my research would have been completely different. So just to give you a background, I got one of the awards from the National Department of Science and Technology Innovation for 3D printed solutions. My lab had one 3D printer, just one 3D printer, which was a very rudimentary 3D printer. So it's not about the technology that you have; it's about how you use the technology or how you use the systems that you have. So now, currently, we have a suite of 3D printers which can be used for multiple varieties of applications. But we learned that with one single device, that one single device led to 6 different innovations, right? It may not be, and I was visiting a very popular university in global north which had one 3D printer per student. And here is a lab of 20-25 people strong which had one 3D printer altogether. I'm talking about my early days as a researcher, which led to 6 different innovations. What would you rate it higher? Right. So it's about your ability, or it's your. I like this term called agility. It's your ability to work in different demanding environments, and this actually, the restricted resources basically helps you do that.
You mean that restricted resources actually make you even more creative for bringing
Exactly.
solution to people actually who are around you and within the same set of resources that they have. So I mean,
Exactly.
you cannot think about providing solution to people from those resource scarce countries, thinking with the mindset of someone sitting in the global north. And you know, yeah, I completely agree with you. Innovation. What is innovation for you? I mean, I'm asking this question, you being serial innovator.
Innovation is something that, again, I don't want to sound very stereotypic. So for me, innovation is something that you can change the dimension in which a current thing is being processed. For example, if something is done from A to B in a particular sequence of order, like A to Z in a particular sequence of order, if you can change the way in which that is currently done in a much more efficient manner without actually having to compromise on anything in the process, that's an innovation. So what that means is, if I were to drill 2 parallel holes, I'm talking about one of my innovations here. If I were to drill 2 parallel holes in an orthopedic surgery, I can do it in multiple ways. But the most important thing is, how do you keep it simple? Simplicity is the key to innovation. If you can keep it simple, and if you can facilitate so that the learning that happens between as an innovator to yourself to the end users, if you can think about how the end users will their perspective would be, and incorporate that in your way of thought process in your innovation, that in my opinion is an innovation that will actually be translatable. So for me, the innovation is actually thinking about what the end users will need and actually making their life easier. So in a way, it's a cyclic process where you make their life easier through your thorough due diligence of what is needed next, right? We can go for a very academic uh, definition, changing new things or building new things, but all of this would be encompassed if you just think about what the end user needs and how you can facilitate in such a way that you don't need a translator in between.
Did you face any kind of challenges in your journey?
Yes, multiple challenges. I think the challenges are basically things that will strengthen you. Challenges are things that will make you realize the purpose that you are doing what you're doing. And the challenges are multifaceted. As an academic, you as an early career academic, you're looking to mentor, and how do we reach the next cadre or next level of your academic journey is one of your biggest challenges, and for which, how do you ensure that you fulfill the academic requirements? That's one of the challenges. The other thing is, as a foreigner living in a foreign country, another foreign country, the challenge comes in how do you make yourself competitive, and get opportunities for funding, for instance, for doing research. And more importantly, how do you sustain and keep the morale of yourself and your team when you're not getting funded? We have a 1 in 10 potential hit ratio in terms of funding. How do you ensure that you keep the morale up? And how do you create this ethic, or how do you create this culture within your teams? You're one side, you're seen as a responsible academic. On the other side, you're still young, you're still learning, you're still making mistakes, you're still learning from your past mistakes.
Now, a very tricky question. And in fact, this is something that I'm asking for having those positive energies from your side. I mean, how do you stay this much positive?
It is quite tricky because you get your highs and lows, right? But so things like, very often I look at success stories from my own innovations, and how people see my innovations and how it has impacted their lives. For example, I got a letter from a user of Atosis Scratch who said, they have not been able to read their favorite book over the last 10 years or so. And this is the first time that they are able to put their glasses and read the book. And that actually gave me tears, because that can keep me alive and kicking for the next 10 years. Just that note. And doctor says his procedure has gone so easier just because of this. And there was another guy who wrote, we get these unsolicited emails which talks about the impact that we have created. Or even graduates who occasionally come to seldom come out, and they say, when you were in the class, you were quite a character, but then what you said at that time is, I'm actually realizing that you were ahead of your times, and you were talking to me what I'm learning now in the industry. So things like that actually makes your day as an academic. And your success is not your own success alone. It's also about the success of the success of your students, your graduates. So there is a thing in the Indian culture that is about what are the things that will make how do you stay afloat? You can lose to two people in your life, just two people, right? Two sets of people. One is your own children. You can lose to your own children. That is absolutely fine, because that they are your children. That is great. The other is your student. You can lose to your student, and if you lose to your student, that's the best thing that an academic as a teacher can have, because that shows that you have trained somebody who's gone to excel over and above what you have done. That you can see, you can see this completely in a negative shade as well. My student is performing better than me. Am I so ill equipped? But the other way of looking at it is, your student is like your children. Like, so in the same way, so they're doing well is basically reflecting on your stature as an academic. So you could take positives from that. So it is about how you the outlook that you have towards your life. And staying spiritually connected helps you to stay positive.
During your studies, did you had this idea that you were someone different, you were out of the box, as your friends, they also said something like that to you?
Definitely not. That is something I have had, this curiosity, that has been driving me crazy all over my life. But I have never expressed my curiosity, because academia or schooling systems or your general university education never allows you to express your curiosity, because you are supposed to go in a particular box. or squares or circles. So if you chat to any of my university undergrad or even postgrad colleagues, they would say, "Ah, this guy, I know that he's a naughty one. He's always at the last of the class. We never expected him to be an academic, and more importantly, we never expected him to be an inventor." So that would be the. But my family gave me a lot of space for me to actually explore things that I like. So I like playing with fire, for instance, and I have burned down my house twice.
God.
I burnt down my father's vehicle, two-wheeler, once. I got smacked. That's a different story. But this is where the curiosity factor comes in, and
Curiosity
it's
and learning. What do you learn from that, by the way?
so it's interesting because my first burning down of the house happened when I was like 4 or 5 years old. No, four when I was in fourth class. That is about 7 or 8 years old. So a little over that. There was this electronic radio setup that I was trying to play with. And that actually was, we used to play with this, like tapping into telephone lines and trying to hear if somebody we can overhear somebody speaking, trying to use radio signals, all those things, using very basic radio mechanisms. And while I was doing this, that started lighting on fire. So one thing that my wife still says that I need to be, they need to be cautious about me and fire is that it can come out very close to me anytime. So I kind of started playing with it, and eventually I started seeing some sparks in the electronic circuitry, which actually led to quite a lot of curiosity again to actually trigger more of this, and eventually it burned down that whole space. And so what I learned from that process is that one thing, you can just see that, don't touch it and come out. Second thing is, you burn, you fall down, you get smacked. You kind of learn that the whole thing over and again. So that actually interested me quite a bit to learn more electronics, learn more about how not to get smacked. That's that's a process. So by these fire incidents, fire is, basically why I was saying the fire incident is because it caused a little bit of damage. But then I used to play quite a bit on the railway. My dad was a train locomotive driver, so he drove trains. So I used to go watch trains go, and that actually is a very complex mechanical system if you look at it in a large picture. So it kind of inspired me about the smaller moving wheels and the system that it has. So all those things, you can see that elements of inspiration from all of this is happening even still on my innovations that is coming out. So it does in a larger scheme of thing, it does converge.
Since childhood, you were very curious. This makes me, think about our education system. Don't you think that it's not that much in the right direction where actually it should be polishing the skills of our children? You have children as well. So how do you see our current education system?
I think it's a very complex question as such, because there are positives in our current educational system, which is like you're able to read something, understand what is there, get the bare minimum. So it helps you. Some of the experts say the current educational system will make you a good clerk. So basically, understand what's there and do what's needed. But the system may not help you to become a inventor or an innovator or somebody who's changing lives. And that has to be self-driven, and that needs to be driven by the curiosity and the curious nature of the kids. And something that I insist my family is that let's not force anything on anyone, because when there's a spark that needs to happen, and that spark, we don't know when that is going to happen, but when it happens, you will figure out what you want to do. And all that you need to do is facilitate them towards that spark, and it will need to happen organically. If you force something to happen on it, it will not last. So the current educational system is good to make you a good office goer, but not a good innovator. So we need to make sure that we basically have systems that can actually trigger or facilitate curiosity that is already in every human who are born. Like every child has that curious nature. It's just allowing them to explore that and see how they can express themselves.
Being an innovator, you have many innovations that are open source, and that we can sense very easily that you have that sense of responsibility of giving back to the society. currently this COVID-19 situation has shown us, in fact, there was a very big debate on, patent licensing and it should be there, should not be there. So you as an inventor, how do you see that? Inventions being protected by the patent or they should be open source?
Excellent question, Almas. So we need to ask a fundamental question, right? Whether it is an open source solution or a patented solution, who's going to pay for the solution? So there needs to be a cost that takes a solution from a laboratory or a manufacturing setup to the needs of the patient. That that translation needs to happen. We can explore this in two hypothetical scenarios. I have an open source solution here, which is already out there. The onus lies on the end user to actually get this, make them go through this whole regulatory process and then get to use it. Or there is a patented solution there, which keeps everything done, but at a cost. So for me, it's not about keeping it whether open source or keeping it patented. That's a question that is almost like I would put that as a secondary emphasis. For me, the question is about what is the business model that is going to take the solution from the manufacturer or from the innovator to the people who need it. We always get confused where this actually needs to be patented or whether this needs to be open source. No. So the business model behind every solution is super critical because you can offer the solution completely free of cost to even a patent solution can be given free of cost to the user who needs it. If you can think of innovative ways of funding mechanism that can support this system. For example, can you use data from the device to learn, equip your system? Or can you, with their informed consent, advertise things that may be of need to the patient? Can you think in that line? So it is not about getting $10 from the users and giving it to the manufacturers. It's the business model that is actually bridging the innovations and the end users. So I wouldn't emphasize on too many open source innovations or too many patented innovations. That won't change the world. The what will change the world is innovative business models that can actually translate either a patented technology or a open source technology to the needs of the people. Because at the end of the day, somebody needs to pay the bills. And who's that? Who's going to pay the bills? If it is an open source solution, so what? Who's going to pay the bills? Right? So we need to answer this question. So I think as a responsible person, we need to be, as a responsible innovator, we need to figure out it's not about just putting your technology in open source. You have the responsibility to also build that vehicle which is going to take your solution to the people who need it. And that is building the right kind of business plan. Right? It might sound that we are distracting ourselves away from innovations and going into business plans. No, because if you don't understand the value chain, if you yourself don't understand the value chain, nobody else will understand the value chain. So you, as an innovator, should understand how you are. What is your plan to take it to the people who need it? Right. So in a nutshell, my simple conclusion is that whether it is open source or patented technology doesn't matter. What matters is how what is the translator vehicle that you have, which can carry this solution to the people who need it at the least economic burden on them. It may not fit into the regular school of thought, but I do feel that there is something that is needed. That is where management sciences and humanities needs to work together with innovators to come out with innovative solutions.
A very great answer, because things are not that simple. Sometimes we say why this patent is not open, but it's not that simple. You need to see from where the money was coming for all this work. And I completely agree with you. We need better innovative models, business models. This leads to the next question. What do you think, Sudesh? What world needs the most? You being
The
an
world needs.
innovator, having so much work in the world of innovation,
I
how do
think in
you
the world of
say?
innovation, it might sound contradictory to what I was speaking so far. So, in a world in which fake science or false information is available free of cost, I think scientific information needs to be free of cost. Right? Something that is validated, so that is something that is scientifically approved, something that is credible, has to be made free of cost. You cannot have a journal publication. I can't pay $40 to read one single article from a journal. Things like that needs to change, right? A world needs a system where science is free, right? Entertainment can be expensive. Now we have the other way around. Entertainment, you can go on YouTube, everything is free. Whereas science, just to read one article, I need to pay $40. Something is wrong in the system, right? We don't want to get into why, how the system, again, I understand somebody needs to pay the bill. So who's going to do that? I mean, so that I understand the models behind it, but we need to figure out a way in which we get fake science or false information that is accessible freely, but scientific information are not accessible freely. So this kind of leads to a whole lot of conspiracy theorists again. So again, in my opinion, if we can make everything open, right, everything transparent, then there won't be much of a need for all these arguments and debates. So I think we need science driven visionary leaderships, right?
Wow.
We need investments in science. We see investments in military. That is great. But are we seeing investments in healthcare? Are we seeing investments in science and technology? We need that, right? If we want to change the world, people around us, we need to invest in healthcare. We need to invest in science and technology. We need to invest in fundamentals of things. So let me quote, two simple things that are called as essential medical technologies, okay, from WHO. So what, in your opinion, would be essential medical technologies from WHO? Maybe, in your thought.
Something that would be accessible to people even living in the low income countries.
Exactly, right? So access to clean water and access to clean air is the most essential medical technology. Because 9 out of 10 problems in the developing countries comes because of lack of these two items, clean water and clean air. Right? We are talking about sophisticated, a Da Vinci system that can do remote surgeries, but we don't have clean water. We don't have clean air. We're talking about rover going to Mars, but we don't have clean water in our streets, on our pipes. This is a contrast. And I think we need to figure out what is our priority. Our priority should be science driven, and it has to be focused on health. Basic communities like public health, things like science and innovation needs to be incorporated, since it needs to be organic, right? What we are seeing is a system that facilitates a unidirectional flow. We need to see an organic growth of things which integrates multifacets of life and come together, and science is the core of all of these things, which can bind this together. And innovation would be the one that takes it to the next level.
That's great, Sudesh. One last message to the future innovators. One last advice to the future innovators.
Advice:
To you.
don't listen to anybody, including myself. Just think about what you want to do and just keep doing that. Because my journey is different to yours, and your journey is unique and beautiful. Just appreciate that and just go on your life, and just trust. If you feel that you can make a difference, just trust that. If you don't, that is absolutely fine. Failure is absolutely fine. My mother says something very often, and I kind of use it whenever I fail. She says, take a string of air, tie it around around a mountain, and pull it. Right? Try pulling it. If you get it, you get a mountain. If you lose it, it's just a string of air. Just keep that in mind. If you lose it, it's fine. Just go to the next one. So keep it simple.
Thank you very much, Sudesh. It was really great to have you in our show.
Thank you, Almas. I really enjoyed the questions, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
So, dear audience, I hope that you have liked our today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel of Traces.Dreams. With this is your host, Almas, signing out. Take care. Until next episode. Goodbye.